Blessed day, everyone. I am Rowena M. Roldan Macaro, Teacher 2 from Congressional Integrated High School, City Schools Division of Dasmariñas. Our desired learning outcome for this session is to first draw out the purposes, principles, and processes of assessment of student cognitive learning outcomes from the national policies and review the current tools and practices in the assessment of student cognitive learning outcomes in terms of content or coverage, usefulness, evidence of validity and reliability, test administration, scoring, and reporting. Depth orders related to classroom assessment, including monitoring and evaluation of learners' progress and achievements, are the following. First is the Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015, or the Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. The other one is Depth Order Number 31, Series of 2020, or the Interim Guidelines for Assessment and Grading in light of the Basic Education Learning Continuity Plan. But since most of the schools are now under the face-to-face learning modality, let us now focus on Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015. For the theoretical basis, classroom assessment is a joint process that involves both teachers and learners. It is an integral part of teaching and learning. Teachers provide appropriate assessment when they aim to holistically measure learners' current and developing abilities while enabling them to take responsibility in the process. This view recognizes the diversity of learners inside the classroom, the need for multiple ways of measuring their varying abilities and learning potentials, and the role of learners as a co-participant in the assessment process. At the heart of this assessment framework is the recognition and delivery consideration of the learner's zone of proximal development by God. Appropriate assessment is committed to ensure learner success in moving from guided to independent display of knowledge, understanding, and skills, and to enable them to transfer this successfully in the future situation. From this point of view, assessment facilitates the development of learners' higher order thinking and 21st century skills. This view of assessment, therefore, acknowledges the unity of instruction and assessment. Assessment is part of day-to-day lessons and extends the day-to-day classroom activities that are already in place in the K-12 curriculum. Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015 defines classroom assessment as the ongoing process of identifying, gathering, organizing, and interpreting quantitative and qualitative information about learners know and can do. Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015 also defines classroom assessment as an integral part of curriculum implementation that allows teachers to track and measure learners' progress and to adjust their instruction accordingly. Also, it defines classroom assessment as a tool used to inform the learners as well as their parents and guardians of their progress. Let us draw out the purposes, principles, and processes of assessment of student cognitive learning outcomes from the national policies enhanced by other national and international references. Let us now start with the purpose of Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015, or the Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. Depth Order Number 8, Series of 2015 will interpret and evaluate each learner's performance against the curriculum standards and competencies. It will recognize each learner's strength and areas for improvement. It will give immediate and constructive feedback to learners about what they have done well, areas where they need to improve, and tips on how to improve. It will help the teachers to reflect on the effectiveness of their teaching and make modification to support the learning of the learners in their care. And lastly, this will be used to gather evidence over time of learners' progress against the curriculum standards and competencies for the interviews.
Good day. This is Shani Aloyan Teacher 3 of Anquilong National High School, Division of Mountain Province, Cordillera Administrative Region. My task is to discuss the principles of DepEd Order Number 8, Series of 2015. DepEd Order Number 8, Series of 2015 is grounded on the following 8 principles. Number 1. Assessment must align with the curriculum and relate directly to the content and performance standards and competencies. Assessment should focus on tracking learners' progress in relation to the content and performance standards in the curriculum, along with the development of 21st century skills. Number 2, assessment must be valid. Assessment should assess what the learners actually learn in the classroom. Validity ensures that the assessment activities and assessment criteria accurately measure the extent to which learners develop the required competencies and meet the standards for their grade level. Number 3, assessment must be reliable and consistent. Reliable assessment requires that clear and consistent processes be followed in developing assessment activities. This is to ensure that if you repeat an assessment activity with the same learners or conduct it at another time, or if another teacher conducts the same activity with different learners, you should still get the same result. Number 4, assessment must be fair and inclusive. Assessment activities should consider the learner's race, gender, learning needs, learning style, language, abilities or disabilities, cultural background, and socioeconomic status. They must never exclude, take advantage of, or disadvantage any individual or group of learners. Number 5, assessment must be manageable for both learners and teachers. Learners need time to process new knowledge and practice new skills. This means that assessment should be developed and implemented at appropriate times in the learning process. Assessment must be manageable for teachers, even in large classes, so that evidence of new learning is gathered over time and in diverse ways. Number 6, assessment must give learners a range of ways to demonstrate their achievements. Teachers must use a range of assessment methods and activities to give learners many opportunities to demonstrate their learning on the knowledge, understanding, skills, and values defined in the curriculum. Number 7, assessment must be part of a transparent, ongoing process where learners' progress is monitored over time. Teacher uses assessment criteria that are based on the curriculum standards and competencies to gather evidence of learners' achievement over time. These criteria should be clear to the learners as they learn and before they carry out assessment activities. Number 8, teachers and learners must use feedback effectively to improve learning and reflect on teaching and learning process. Teachers give ongoing and explicit feedback to learners throughout the learning and assessment process, telling them what they have done well, where they need to improve, and how to improve. Teachers also use assessment data to reflect on, modify, and improve their teaching practices.
Hey everyone, I'm Norman Tibalino, a Technology and Livelihood Education teacher of the Misamis Oriental General Comprehensive High School, Schools Division of Misamis Oriental, Region 10. Today I'll be discussing the process on the policy guidelines on classroom assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program as stipulated in DepEd Order Number 8, Series of 2015. Process of assessment of learners' cognitive learning outcomes. Both teachers and learners participate in this collaborative approach. It is an essential component of both teaching and learning. In order to holistically assess learners' existing and emerging skills while empowering them to assume responsibility for the process, teachers must test learners' abilities in a variety of contexts. This viewpoint recognizes the diversity of learners in the classroom, the need for multiple methods of assessing their diverse skills and learning potentials, and the learners' participation as co-participants in the assessment process. Process of assessment of learners' cognitive learning outcomes on the part of the teachers. Use classroom essential methods that are in line with curriculum standards. Second, always discuss the lesson's objectives to your learners so that they can strive to reach or even surpass them. Number three, provide immediate feedback to learners about their learning process or progress. Assessment in the classroom also evaluates how well learners have mastered certain skills. Number four, adopt Anderson and Cartwell's cognitive process dimensions, not only in lesson development, but also in the creation of assessment tasks and activities. Number five, ensure the use of formative and summative assessment in the classroom. This means that formative assessments occur throughout a lesson, while summative assessments occur at the end. Process of learner of assessment of learners' cognitive learning outcomes on the part of the learners. Number one, understand what they know about the subject. Know the lesson's objectives and how to perform effectively in the lesson. Determine obstacles to learning. Number four, identify factors that facilitate their learning. Identify areas where they do well and where they need support. Monitor their progress and make their own progress decisions. 7. Take charge of their learning. Look for assistance throughout remedial actions, enrichment, and other measures. Take part in group activities. And lastly, synthesize their awareness, insights, and skills during summative assessment.
Good day once again. I am Roxalan B. Chavez, Secondary School Teacher 3 from Tawagan Sur National High School, Schools Division of Pagadian City, Region 9, Zamboanga Peninsula. So my task today is to explain one of the assessments stipulated in Depot Order Number 8, Series of 2015, which is named as the Policy Guidelines on Classroom Assessment for the K-12 Basic Education Program. One of the type of assessment under Depot Order Number 8 is actually the formative assessment. These assessments may be integrated in all parts of the lesson, which means before the lesson proper, and after the lesson. With the use of formative assessment, teacher will be able to acquire information on the current status and level of learners' knowledge, skills, or competencies. The importance of those current status on the learners is for the modification of instructional plan to be able to suit to the needs of every learner. There are two types of formative assessment. This includes individual formative assessment and collaborative formative assessment. When we say individual formative assessment, learners are to demonstrate independently what has been mastered through the range of activities, such as check-up quizzes, written exercises, performances, models, and even electronic presentation. Compared to collaborative formative assessment, when we say collaborative, this includes peer assessment, which allows students to support each other's learning, such as discussion, role-playing, games, and other group activities may be used as performance-based assessment wherein they can have support and extend others' learning. For the said depth order, which is the depth order number 8 series of 2015, the deeper purpose of the formative assessment was clearly seen here, as formative assessment may be done before the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson. For the purpose of the formative assessment before the lesson for the learners, number 1, it helps us know what the learners know about the topic or the lesson. Number 2, understand the purpose of the lesson and how to do well in the lesson. Number 3, identify ideas or concepts that the learners misunderstands. And number 4, identify the barriers to learning. In the case of the teacher, the main purpose of the formative assessment before the lesson is number 1, to get the information about what the learners already know and what they can do about the new lesson. Number 2, share learning intentions and success criteria to the learners. Number 3 is to determine misconceptions. And number 4, identify what are the hinders of the learning. The use of the formative assessment before the lesson will help the teachers to know the prior knowledge and strength of the learners, which is prior to the instruction, so that the teacher will be able to design an instructional plan needed or better that suits the needs of the learner. Example of those assessment methods includes agree or disagree activities, games, interviews, inventories, checklists of skills that are relevant to the topic in the learning area, or KWA activities like what I know, what I want to know, and what I learned, open-ended questions, and practice exercises. In the case of the purpose of formative assessment during the lesson proper itself, for the learner, number 1, it identify what strengths and the weaknesses of the learners. Number 2, identify the barriers to learning. Number 3, identify factors that help him/her learn. Number 4, what or to know what the learner knows and does not know. And number 5, monitor the learner's own progress. On the other hand, with regards to the teacher, the purpose of the formative assessment, for the lesson proper is number 1, to provide immediate feedback to the learners. Identify what are the hinders in learning. Number 3, identify what facilitates the learning. Number 4 is to identify the learning gaps. 5 is, of course, to track the learner's progress in comparison to formative assessment results prior to the lesson proper. And number 6 is to make decisions on whether to proceed with the next lesson, reteach, or provide for corrective measures or reinforcements. In this case, if assessment or the formative assessment is done during the lesson proper, teachers can modify instruction or learning activities to help learners achieve the learning outcomes. Examples of those assessment methods that we can use for the teacher during the lesson proper are those of the following. Number 1, multimedia presentations. Number 2, observations. Number 3, other formative performance tasks like simple activities that can be drawn from specific topic or a lesson. Number 4, quizzes, which are recorded but not graded. Number 5, recitations. And number 6, simulation of activities. In the case of after the lesson, the purpose of formative assessment for the learner is number 1, tell and recognize whether the learner met the learning objective and success criteria. Number 2, to seek support through remediation, enrichment, or other strategies. With the case of the teacher, the main purpose of formative assessment after the lesson is number 1, assess whether learning objectives have been met for a specified duration. Number 2, is to remediate and or enrich with appropriate strategies as needed. And number 3 is to evaluate whether the learning intentions and success criteria have been met. In all the information that can be acquired from the assessment results, especially during or before the lesson, during the lesson proper, especially after the lesson proper, may be a very good information for the teachers to know how they will going to facilitate student learnings. In the sense of the examples of the assessment methods after the lessons, this includes checklist, discussions, games, performance tasks that emanate from the lesson objectives, practice exercises, short quizzes, or written works. Let's just all remember that all the assessment is actually an integral part of the instructional process where teachers design and conduct instruction, which includes our teaching, so learners can achieve the target and learning outcomes defined by the curriculum. And these assessments will work best when the purpose is clear, because without its purpose, it is difficult to ask teachers to design or plan assessment effectively and efficiently. That is all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Neil Charlie B. Lagumbay, and I am from the Division of Southern Leyte, Region 8, Eastern Visayas. So, my task is to discuss to you about the summative assessment in the Lipid Order Number 8 series of 2015. So, summative assessment will be administered at the end of the entire quarter. So, this to determine how well the learners can demonstrate content knowledge and competencies articulated in the learning standards. So, there are two kinds of summative assessment. So, we can use the individual summative assessment, which the learners may be assessed individually through unit test and quarterly assessment. Another is the collaborative assessment. Learners may participate in a group activities in which they cooperate to produce evidence of their learning. What are the components of the summative assessment? So first component is the learning area or the written work. So the purpose of this is number 1, assess the learner's understanding of concept and application of skills in written form. Another is to prepare the learners for quarterly assessments. and this will be given at the end of the topic or the unit. Next is the performance task. So let me read the purpose. It involved the students in the learning process individually or in collaboration with the teammates over a period of time. Number two, give students opportunities to demonstrate and integrate their knowledge, understanding, and skills about topics or lessons learned in a specific life situation by performing or producing evidence of their learning. Number three, give students the freedom to express their learning in appropriate and diverse ways. Number four, encourage students' inquiry, integration of knowledge, understanding, and skills in various contexts beyond the assessment period. So it should be given at the end of the lesson, focusing on the topic or skill lesson. So this could be done several times within the quarter. Next is the quarterly assessment. Well, this will be given at the end of the quarter. The purpose of this is to synthesize all the learning skills, concepts, and values learned in the entire quarter. Ito na po yung periodical test. The list of summative assessment tools. So in written work, we can use chapter test and unit test. In performance task, we can use the product output like technical drawing, prototype building, and others. In written output also, we can use essays, diagrams, charts, and models, work designs, and plans. While on the other hand, a performance-based task, for example, is a return demonstration, discuss application, laboratory exercises, and others. The grading system. The K-12 basic education program uses standards and competency-based grading system. These are found in the curriculum guides. All grades will be based on the weighted row score of the learner's summative assessment. The minimum grade needed to pass a specific learning area is 60, which is transmitted in the report card. The lowest mark that can appear on the report card is 60 for the quarterly grades and the final grade. For these guidelines, the department will use a floor grade considered as the lowest possible grade that will appear on the learner's report card. Learners from grade 1 to 12 are graded on written work, performance tasks, and quarterly assessments every quarter. These three are given specific percentage weights that vary according to the nature of the learning area. Weight of the components for grade 1 to 10. So let's go specific to EBP, TLE, or TLE. So as you can see here, written work is 20, performance task is 60, quarterly assessment is 20. This is an example of a class record from TLE. Weight of the components for senior high school. So TVL or Technical Vocational and Livelihood, we have also 60 for written work, 60 for performance task, and 20 for quarterly assessment. This is an example of a TVL grade 11 to 12 class record. So this is the precipitation table that is being provided by the DepEd Order number 8, series of 2015. So this is the DepEd 4138.